Hey guys, Chris Dorry here. Today, due to popular demand, I'll be taking you through some of this year's draft bargains based on my power rankings. And also make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell because over the coming weeks I'll be posting future videos. And next week you've got to look forward to, over the history of the draft, the number one draft picks. I'll be putting them in a tier list and ranking them in order. So make sure you don't miss out on that one.
So to take us through our biggest draft bargains, so the first standout to me, of course, was Logan McDonald. So other than Jamara, he would have been the guy where I would have picked him absolutely the next guy. So if Jamara is the 1A, Logan's the 1B, where he could potentially be the best player in the draft, could be the best key forward in the league for all we know. He's someone who has that scope to reach that sort of ceiling if all goes well. And developing under Buddy, well, that's pretty exciting. So, I really look forward to seeing how Logan goes at the next level. And I'm expecting year one that he'll get games for Sydney. So that's something to watch as well. So next up, I'm looking at Lachie Jones. So he's someone where a bid came a lot later than really should have been the case. It was sort of where I was predicting. But in saying that, Jones is someone where he's around 1 year, one ready defender. And he's someone where, if not for the extreme, quality of Port Adelaide's backline, he's someone where I'd absolutely be saying that he'd be around one starter. But due to that depth, and that sheer quality, perhaps he won't be. But he's someone where, he'll be in the mix for selection next year and he's certainly ready to go. And he's someone as well where I think he's got the scope in the future to become a midfielder as well because he wins such a high proportion of the ball contested. So, and add to that the burst of speed, well, he's got some real X factor and he could be a really good player, be it starting his career in defence and then shifting to become more of a midfielder or however Port Adelaide decide to utilise him. But certainly this year he was terrific in the sandful in defence, and seeing the second half of his year, well, he was absolutely terrific. So he's absolutely someone to watch next year. So next up, Reef McGuinness for Collingwood. He's someone where, in terms of this area of my rankings, I had it pretty sort of open, where I could have had him at 8, could have had him at 14. But again, with all these biggest bargains, I guess to put it that way, each time they've been pretty much, twice as high in my rankings as they are where they got drafted. So that's sort of, what allowed them to be classified in this sort of range for me. And with Reef, he's someone where he may not even play in year one. I think he's someone where more around the year 3 mark he'll really come good. But being that sort of taller midfielder, still having a sort of, developing midfield game, I'd say give him that sort of time and patience. But with time, he definitely has that scope to come good because he's got the tools, he's got the ground level craft, has the athleticism, can win it a bit, strong mark, has the versatility to play all over the field, be it midfield, forward, back. So he really gives you options. So he's someone Pies fans should be excited about. Next up, Jack Carroll, and he may have been the biggest, draft bargain in the draft, where just the sheer discrepancy between where I rated him in my power rankings versus where he actually went in the draft. So Carlton have got a really good one, late developer, late year birthday, would have been one of the youngest drafted in this year's draft, December birthday, but he's someone where he always had that class, but he also developed that contested side to his game on a really high level this year. So his progress will be really interesting to watch. He may or may not play in year 1, but probably around the year 2 mark, I think we'll really be seeing a lot of Jack. So that's something to look forward to as well. And then we've got a Jackson Haitley. So number 1 in the preseason draft, I rated him about the equivalent of a late first round pick in this draft. So he's someone where I'd say round 1, lock him in. If Adelaide aren't playing him in their midfield from the start, well, I don't really know what they're doing. He should just be a pretty automatic Crouch replacement for mine. So next up, I'm looking at a Joel Jeffrey, where 17 in my power rankings, but they could pre-list him. So they've got an absolute bargain there. Whether he's a forward, whether he's a back, he's just that high leaping, strong marking type. He's got a lot of class to him as well, has the evasion. So he's someone where just with ball in hand or flying for a mark is really exciting. So I think Gold Coast have a lot of chances with him, and personally I'd develop him back, but at this stage he's probably more comfortable forward. So we'll see what they do with him. When he plays, well, that'll be something to track, but he's someone where maybe he could play next year, but we'll have to wait and see. So next up, so I've got a Brandon Walker, so Fremantle Next Gen Academy. So he's someone where coming out of defence, he really takes on the game well, where he's got the speed, he's got the run and dare, but then he's got that sort of agility, can get around you, but then he'll put in a don't argue. So he's someone where he's got that real power coming out of defence and is a pretty exciting player, and I think he's pretty developable. Whether he'll play next year, not sure, but he's someone where definitely over the coming years he's got scope to develop, and he could be someone who, in that latter portion of the draft, could represent value. And I'm looking the same at a Isaiah Winder or Winder, as some of the WA people pronounce him. So he's someone where mostly is a forward, but he could push through the midfield. Maybe you could put him back, but he just has a lot of X factor. He's someone where he's just got that speed, he's got the skills. Just offensively, he's one of the more gifted players in this draft. So seeing him go as late as he did, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought maybe more around the mid-draft region he'd feature. So I think West Coast have got a real bargain here and someone they can really develop. And with West Coast being such a strong team, we probably won't see him next year. But again, give him a few years, give him a bit of time to develop, and he's someone with the scope to come good. And next up, we've got a Jack Ginnivan. So he's someone where, in my opinion, in the rookie draft, he was probably that that bargain of the rookie draft. So he's someone where he's got the skills, you can play him forward, mid, back. So he gives you a lot of options, and he's someone where, in terms of drawing frees, is one of the best I've seen doing it, and probably the best in this draft at that, even if it's probably not the most desirable skill to some fans. But yeah, he's someone where he's got game, he's got a pretty immediate game, and look, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in year one for Collingwood. So he's someone where Pies fans and I guess those fantasy football people alike should be keeping a track of him too. And next up, of course, we've got the good value picks. So these are the guys where we're not quite getting that doubling, I guess, in value, to put it that way, but these are still pretty good value picks nonetheless, and they deserve acknowledgement because, in my opinion, they're really good picks. So you've got an Elijah Hollands. So he's someone where a lot of people would have taken him even earlier than perhaps I might have him in my rankings, but for Hawthorn at pick 7, great value, highest impact per possession player in the draft. This year, I'd say, look, he's not someone who's probably going to do too much coming off the major injury, but he's someone where, look, give him a year to get his legs under him, and I think probably in 2022 you'll really see a really influential player, whether he's probably mostly forward to start with, but he can definitely go through the midfield and I guess rotate through there pretty soon as well. And whether it's outside, inside, he gives you options, but he'll be a player for Hawthorn, I reckon, so they've done really well with that pick. Got a Finlay McRae, so he's someone where more advanced than his brother at the same age, where I was looking at Jack as someone where really it was the second half of his draft year that he came really good, whereas with the Finlay, well, I was looking at him last year and really liked his play. So, and look, he is someone where he's not as tall. We've got a Jack who's a 191, Finlay who's a 186, maybe he grows another couple of centimetres perhaps, which would be a good outcome for a Collingwood, but he's someone where he's certainly more skilled than his brother, but also more advanced the same age. So it would have been fascinating to see how he may have developed this year. So I think Collingwood, they've got a pretty good mid in Finlay. So whether he plays next year, we'll have to see how that goes. Given he hasn't played this year, we don't really know where he's at as with the other Victorians, but he's someone who may potentially at some stage be in the mix, and he can find it, and maybe he's played probably mostly outside to start, maybe a little across half forward, but I do like him more as that mid, whether he's inside, outside, a bit of both. That's where I think he'll provide the value, a bit like with a Jack. And then I'm looking at a Braden Cook, where a late growing, medium sort of tallish forward, could push up onto a wing. You could even put him behind the ball if you want, but he's someone where he's a strong mark. Athletically, he actually looks pretty good in game despite the testing, so he's someone where I think he'll come good, but growing the 7 centimetres or so, kicking a couple of goals a game, improving as much as he did, I think Adelaide have got a good amount of value here with this pick, so they've done well. And I'm thinking the same with Sam Berry as well, who was their next pick as well. So 18 in my power rankings. He's someone where he's just an immediate mid. He can play round 1, year 1. I'd actually be looking at him from a fantasy or supercoach perspective if he gets those early opportunities, because he's someone who can rack it up and really have an impact. And he's someone where, looking at where he was sort of this time last year compared to where, say, Caleb Sarong was at the same stage, he's not all that far off. Probably a bit more advanced as a tackler, maybe not quite the same accumulation or scoreboard impact, but very influential player and someone who I've found a lot of people have really slept on, and I feel wrongly in this draft, where he's someone, although I had him at about 18, well, he's someone where really in that whole bracket I could have had him even a bit higher. So I do see a lot of value in a berry. And then we've got a Maurice Rioli Jr., so someone where I rated him 15 higher than where he went. So yeah, I look at him as value. He's someone where he's got, I guess, those pressuring gifts where he'll just really give those second, third efforts, strong tackler, has some instincts around goal, instinctive at ground level, so he's got scope to develop. He'll take time, so he's someone where, look, give him a year or two to come good, but with a bit of time, yeah, look, I think he's got a chance to play games, and he could be another sort of Daniel Rioli type, where he can play a similar style of game, probably not quite as refined of a game yet, but he can get there. So he's got that upside and that scope to come good. And then I'm looking at a Zane True. So other than Ginnivan, he's probably that other value rookie that I saw. So he's that, I guess, really advanced midfielder. And something that I've noticed with West Coast over the years is that they're a team where, I guess the year before their draft year, often the guys they pick were really good then, but in their draft year probably haven't developed or taken that next step. So for those looking to do good phantom drafts, and this is something I forgot about this year, it's a constant trend that I've noticed with West Coast over really the last 10 years, where they'll take those guys who are a year out from their draft, even probably 15 years, frankly. West Coast have just always had that habit. They did it with True, they did it with Edwards again this year, where looking a year out from the draft, some people would have had Edwards in the first round conversation. True would have been as well for a lot of people. And yeah, West Coast got those guys. And with a True, look, it's a case of last year he had a 40 disposal, 10 tackle game. This year, although he's been consistent, been a really good midfielder when he has been out there, and he's been winning the contested ball, dishing out by hand, good tackler, so he has that sort of inside game, but he probably doesn't have the diversity beyond that, where he's not really doing anything on the outside, he's not that threat forward of centre, so he does need to add a few more tricks, and that's why that sort of, I guess, ranking is pretty representative of where I rate him, and where I guess clubs seem to rate him as well, as that midfielder without that sort of extra hot sauce, I suppose. And then we're looking at an Alex Davies, so he's someone for Gold Coast where, again, pre-listed, he's an easy get. Just 32 in my power rankings, some considered him a first-round pick. For me, not quite, because he does, I guess, lack that composure, decision-making in traffic sometimes, where just you get the skill errors when he's pressured. He does have some composure in some respects where he can weave through traffic, but just in terms of his disposal under pressure, that can be a bit weak. So even though he is that taller mid, about a 192, maybe even a 193 by now, good athlete, has that basketball background, so there's a bit there to suggest he's developable, which is sort of represented here in my rankings. But in saying that, look, he's someone where I wouldn't rate him a first rounder like some would. So thanks guys for watching, and if you liked my video, make sure you like, and if you've got any comments or questions, leave it down below and I'm happy to answer. But yeah, make sure if you haven't already, subscribe, hit the notification bell, because over this, I guess, break period from footy, I will be producing more videos, so make sure you keep tuned and enjoy the upcoming content. Thanks guys, see you in the next video.